to be able to do it. And therefore, it's been especially interesting. It's really neat to see the correlations between various aspects of the mind and various aspects of the brain. To see different blobs, orange blobs usually, light up, as it were, in MRI imagery that correlate with meditative states or with the development of personal qualities like emotional balance. That's pretty neat. But if you think about it, what's useful about it? So what? There's a correlation. Oh, good on you, scientists, but how does that help me with my resentments for other people? And there are certain aspects, though, of the neuroscientific understanding of the mind that are actually really practical and really helpful. And one of the leading examples of that is what scientists call the negativity bias of the brain. Or as I put it in shorthand, we have a brain that's like Velcro for the bad, the Teflon for the good. The quick version is that as our ancestors were trying to stay alive and keep their babies alive, who could keep their babies alive, they needed to both get carrots, like food, mating opportunities, things like that, as well as avoid sticks, like predators, natural hazards, or aggression inside their band or between bands. Both are important, but the difference is this: if you don't get a carrot today, you'll probably have a chance of one tomorrow. But if you fail to avoid that stick today, whack, lethal consequences, no more carrots forever. Negative stimuli, or the possibility of a negative event, has usually more urgency and impact on raw survival. So we've therefore got a brain that's designed to do 5 things. And this is locked and loaded today when you're dealing with the real world of relationships at work or at home or with friends or family. First, we tend to scan for bad news out there in the world and also inside ourselves in our body, like, what's wrong? What's wrong? Do you still love me? Or did I say? We're scanning. 2, if we locate that one tile in the mosaic of reality that's flashing red, tunnel vision, we lock down upon it because we have to deal with it. 3rd, the brain overreacts to it. The brain reacts more intensely to negative stimuli than to equally intense positive stimuli. Red alert. And then 4th, that whole package is fast-tracked into emotional memory, somatic memory, as well as other forms of memory, social memory. Once burned, twice shy, never forget. So a lot of research shows, for example, that negative interactions in a relationship are much more consequential than positive interactions. We therefore, it's said that there needs to be a multiplier effect for positive moments with your partner or in other forms of relationship. The exact ratio, it's a little controversial, it's probably kind of loose. Initially, John Gottman, one of the first people researching this, talked about a 5-to-1 ratio. And that's pretty intense. When I came across that material in grad school, I thought back on my marriage and I'm like, whoa, how's that for my wife? 5-to-1? I think I need to raise my game, And so that's an example of the ways in which we're designed to overlearn from painful, stressful, harmful experiences relative to beneficial, enjoyable, wholesome experiences. And the 5th thing that happens last is that the brain gets sensitized through the stress hormone cortisol and through other means as well. We become sensitized to the negative so that we react even more intensely to little moments of misunderstanding, little bits of criticism coming at you, or the other person dropping the ball, or yet again forgetting how to load the dishwasher properly after you've told them 10 times. I've been on the receiving end of that. And so point is that those experiences release cortisol, which sensitizes the alarm bell of the brain, the amygdala, 2 of them, one on either side. And then also it tends to weaken nearby region, the hippocampus, that calms down the alarm bell and puts things in context. So that creates a vicious cycle over time. The takeaway from that for me is when you're upset, we get upset, things are unpleasant, something has happened. Nothing I'm saying is about positive thinking. I don't believe in positive thinking. I believe in realistic thinking. The root of suffering, deep root, is ignorance. I think it's also a scientific value of knowing. Science, the Greek roots of the word are about knowing. So we want to know clearly what's really true. So nothing I'm saying is about papering over pain or denying injustice or what's dangerous or bad, to use that word loosely. That said, in relationships, once something painful, difficult, irritating has arisen, it's really important to go mindful in relationship to it as quickly as possible, which means holding that anger or pain or hurt or sadness or loneliness in a space of untroubled awareness. The nature of awareness is that it itself is never tainted or harmed by what it represents. It's like a pond or a field in which some serious crud is happening. So when you do that, you stop the reinforcing of it. The negativity bias then just is like a circuit breaker in effect. And in fact, you're starting to associate. In the famous saying, neurons that fire together wire together. So you are associating. They are firing together the upset with your partner, let's say, or the pulling up of this traumatic memory or collection of experiences from your teen years or early childhood. That's there, but it's being associated with an untroubled, spacious, ongoing, easeful witnessing of it, which then tends to calm and soothe it, especially with repetition over time. So as rapidly as you can, pull out of what I call the red zone, the reactive setting, which is designed by evolution to keep us alive, but there's a lot of collateral damage that comes with it. And we're designed by Mother Nature to get out of that red zone spike of upset as rapidly as possible. Otherwise, we start accumulating what's called allostatic load, which is bad for long-term physical and mental health, as well as we accumulate interpersonal allostatic load. The cuts of the fabric of our relatedness. So after a while, it becomes very frayed, and then the least strong wind can blow it apart. So point one, when there is some kind of upset running because of the negativity bias, go mindful as fast as you can and help yourself come to a soft landing, not out of suppressing the experience or resisting what's unpleasant, but out of kindness and informed wisdom about how your body works, how your biology really, really works. There's a kind of humility that respects and surrenders to the biological nature that we are, that is the basis for our consciousness. That's one. And two, again and again and again, when there is an authentically good moment with someone, your coworker, that annoying guy Bob who's on your work team but has a good heart, even though he's annoying, or a moment of friendliness at the deli, or a exchange of a look and a smile with a stranger on the street, or cuddling with your partner, or having a soft landing based on after working through some upset or argument. Several dozen of these moments a day, usually a dozen or so seconds of breath in duration or less, but they're real. And they can be, of course, longer. When we have those moments, given the ways that the brain is like Teflon for the good, help the brain really receive those beneficial experiences. It's a little like, I have a bit of a business background, a balance sheet, assets and liabilities, right? Assets green, liabilities red, let's say. We've got a brain that's loading liabilities in the relational balance sheet, just like that. Bing, 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 bing. To counterbalance that and in effect just level the playing field, we need to tilt toward the positive, the assets of authentic, good interactive moments or experiences, and then gradually build up that asset base so that when inevitably something happens, it lands or is netted against this huge bank account built up of authentically enjoyable and beneficial experiences with that other person and with people in general, so that you can stay rested in love even as some kind of wave rolls through you of criticism or disdain or rejection or dismissal from another person. So we ask ourselves, what are the foundations of healthy relationships? And to enter into the topic, I'm reminded of the great family therapist, Virginia Satir, no longer alive. And she would do workshops with people in which she would have everybody in the room show, if they were willing to, or bump into others with their belly buttons. And she pointed out that we're universally born with a belly button, which is to say our umbilical connection with our mother. We all have this immediate and tangible and very specific reminder of our socially dependent nature, including in the most fundamental life and death kind of sense. That's the cord through which supplies came into us. And in that context, we as social beings all want good, healthy relationships of different kinds and styles. There's a lot of diversity, extroverts, introverts, different kind of cultural norms for relatedness, different settings, different functions that relationships serve. But we are joined, much as we all have a belly button, we all have a longing for satisfying, healthy, supportive, good relationships. So the question then becomes, what causes it? One of the great shared perspectives of both science and the contemplative traditions is that phenomena arise due to causes. So one can then get really interested in mobilizing the positive causes of positive relationships. And I think there are three categories of fundamental beneficial causes or foundations or roots of good relationships. The first of these is virtue. And that's a general term. The root of the word is strength, but more broadly means, take care of your own business, clean up your own side of the street, or as Google puts it, don't be evil. In other words, however a person defines their own integrity system, manage your own integrity. For me, it's kind of straightforward. Don't be a jerk, right? Or if you are jerky, clean it up as fast as you can. I mean, have a fundamental moral stance in which you are taking care of your own issues and taking responsibility for your impact on other people and operating with some reasonable amount of ethics and morality and integrity, virtue. I think of relationships a lot in terms of what I call the 80-20 rule. Sure, put 20% of your attention on how the other person could clean up their messes better, but put 80% of your awareness on how you can be a better, fill in the blank, parent, spouse, partner, friend, student, coworker, manager, employee. Look to your own side of the street. That's not to be a doormat for other people, but actually it puts you on the moral high ground. And it also is your best odds strategy for eliciting good treatment from other people to practice unilateral virtue on your own side. Obviously, over time, you watch and see what they do, but without needing a lot of quid pro quos from other people, I'll change if you change, you first, right? Taking care of your own side of the street. That's a really good way to elicit good behavior. And ultimately, if you don't get it, then you, if possible, adjust the relationship. So virtue. Second, benevolence, another fancy word, basically having good wishes for other people rather than ill will. Having a basic stance of warm-heartedness and wishing well. It doesn't mean, again, waiving your own rights or giving up your own needs, or not simultaneously wishing someone well while recognizing that it's appropriate for justice to be served in some way or some consequence to land on the other, with compassion for the impact of that consequence, with also a recognition that it serves the greater good for that consequence to occur in this complex territory, with, in this case, a spotlight on benevolence. So that's where, for me, things like compassion and loving kindness, altruistic joy, sympathetic joy, happiness that they're happy, things like that come in. Third, for lack of a better word, I'll call it engagement. This is the territory of interactive skills and especially repair. One thing I've seen as a long time couples counselor, dad, husband, friend, business person, business consultant, etc., is that relationships are a lot like a bicycle. You're always falling in one direction or another. The question is, can you repair? So misattunements, empathic breakdowns, misunderstandings, crankiness, it's the inner menagerie, the inner zoo, the inner lizard or mouse or monkey gets into it or gets hurt, stuff happens. What then? That's the key question. Can we repair? And I've come to see that repair in as close to real time, as close to the event as possible, done skillfully, is critically important in relationships as one of the major features of engagement. I'll get to a few others in a moment. For me, I would say that the lack of repair in a relationship is a big yellow-orange flag. The unwillingness to repair, the lack of repair, is a total red flag for any kind of significant relationship. And so there are a variety of skills having to do with repair, including forgiveness, also including speaking really firmly and clearly with a strong heart about how one was affected, recognizing the distinction between intent and impact. I can have neutral or positive intent, and yet my impact on the other person could be harmful. Implementing correction. I think of 3 kinds of responses under the heading of repair to the needs of others. I call it moral fault, skillful correction, gracious gift. Moral fault is when you're right, I do deserve a wince or remorse for what I did to you, or just the way I was negligent or dropped the ball. I really apologize. Then there's a category of skillful correction where, it wasn't that I did something bad, but with the benefit of hindsight, I can see in retrospect how I could have been more skillful. And from now on, I'm going to be more skillful correction. And that's interesting because even if the other person is saying bad, 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 and you go, no, I wasn't bad, and I'm going to be more skillful, we can retain a kind of inner freedom to claim and implement, again, out of both benevolence and enlightened self-interest, because it's a fast way to get them off your back, to implement the correction going forward without taking on shame, without taking on remorse. You think I deserve shame for that? I don't. And I'm going to put in some skillful correction, and I'm not going to try to make you believe I am, but watch what I do, and I'm going to do it. Right? And then there's this third category, gracious gift, where it's not that you did something wrong, and it's not even a matter of skillfulness, but they like you to drive slower, or they just can't stand the smell of mayonnaise. Our daughter hates the smell of mayonnaise. All right, fine. I'm not going to bring mayonnaise to the table with the lid unscrewed from the jar. I'm going to put it on my plate in the kitchen and leave it, and then bring it to the table. Gracious gift. What's the big deal? I don't mean, again, being dominated or abused by other people, but so often in life, it would just make people happier if we just gave it to them. I mean, to be frank, this can be a controversial topic. I'll try to do it in a PG-13 kind of way. In relationships, often there's a different valuing on frequency and length of conversation. Often in relationships, romantic relationships, there's a different valuing around sex. Sometimes those differences seem to load fairly heavily on gender. Not always. Well, is it that big a deal to spend 20 minutes over the course of a day with your partner, maybe in one chunk, maybe spread out, maybe longer, really listening and giving over to a real conversation? Maybe their topic of interest is their sister-in-law and you're kind of tired of that topic, but too bad. It's benevolent and virtuous as well as enlightened self-interest to engage the other person in that way. Flip it around, maybe, at some frequency that feels wholesome and not abusive or controlling or bad. There's a place for some kind of entering into a sort of sensual, erotic territory that maybe is not top of mind, but it's within a range of authentic possibilities. So you think, I'm going to go to the high end of this range and I'm going to get into it after a while. And when it's it's all good. I mean, I find very often if we just do that little thing, just do the dishes, right? Or just take on board, I really need to prioritize getting home by a certain time and not get sloppy about that. I need to bring the same impeccableness to my agreements at home that I bring naturally to my agreements at work without even thinking about it, even though it's much more trivial in my value structure than my relations at home. That givingness, that generosity of the heart is makes an enormous difference much of the time. And it puts you in a much more solid place to ask for that kind of generosity from the other person. So maybe I'll just say one more thing about engagement. So I've talked so far about repair. I've also talked about, in the context of repair, but also preventing the need for repair. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Leading with generosity for the other person and not being so stingy. Loosening the knots that tighten the purse inside of goodies for the other person. Not to exhaust yourself, not to exhaust yourself, not to allow other people to manipulate you around that, but in a way that feels free and wise to do that. In addition to that, the last thing, I find it so interesting is to just treat people well without jumping through hoops, but to restrain, a little under the heading of virtue, very routine forms of things like interrupting other people or being critical or dropping in tone, harsh tone, that's just uncalled for, or being over controlling. They're in the middle of doing something, it's going just fine. Do you really need to give them advice, which has an implicit one-upness in it? Maybe they're about to really drive over the cliff, but short of that, it's going fine. Just let it roll, you know, or other things like that. Teenagers, adolescents, not giving unwanted advice. That's not really necessary. Just a little bit of attentiveness to that. And then again, mindfulness is so helpful for that, to be able to track also differences between people. What is irksome for a certain kind of person is not necessarily irksome for a different person. So tuning into what is irksome for that person. And then on that heading, to really sustain an awareness of what the imperative needs are for the other person or their priorities. Like, to go back to that point about autonomy and intimacy, which does sometimes load on gender due to socialization, if not biology. So, for example, if the other person has a high need for a sustained experience of we-ness, joining, we're together, we're with each other, we're on the same team, we belong to the same tribe. If they have a high need for that, why not do little things that don't cost you much, if anything, to help them keep being reassured of the ongoingness of that critically important thing? Or if you've got to do something challenging with that other person, see if there's a way to establish that sense of relatedness and intimacy on the basis of which you got to talk about the ways that you're mad at them or something. Flip it around. What if that person has a high need for autonomy? Maybe they grew up, as I did, in a pretty kind of dominating home. So a person like me has become a little prickly about being pushed around, right? Whatever. Or they're just, that it's their nature to be quite independent, let's say. If that's true, what are the little things that one could do to that person to not make them feel that autonomy is threatened, or little things one could do with that person to keep reassuring that there's respect for their fundamental freedom to make their own choices, to have agency, on the basis of which there are requests for greater connection.
Oh, darn, missed the whole thing.
I wanted to share another screen. Can anybody see that?
Nothing yet.
I think I need a tutorial or something, but oh, here we go.
Too.
Is that there?
Nothing yet.
How about there?
No. So
How
you have to,
about this one?
there you go. You got it.
I'm gonna just close out this too. Okay, everybody can see that?
Yes.
Perfect, okay. So I just open up for anybody to make any comments that.
Yeah, I wanted to share that a couple of the things that he was talking about are beautifully encapsulated in Thich Nhat Hanh's. Oh, just a minute, I just went blank. The peace,
The
his
peace treaty?
treaty, yes. So when I post the video for this morning and put it under our resources under summary of the weekly talks, I'll also post the link to the peace treaty because it really helps with several of the things that he mentioned today. So it gives you a how to, a step by step how to do some of these things that Rick Hansen mentioned.
Thank you, Sangamita.
Sangamita. Sangamita.
I'll share that I mentioned before I got married 3 years ago, and in my wife's wedding vows, she said, "I will excuse the haphazard way that you load the dishwasher." And it was funny, but like Rick said, it's I still haven't learned how to do it, and I sort of do it out of defiance a bit now, just put things in the way I want to. And but it is a way of sort of letting go and having what he says, he talks about a gracious gift of just letting go of some of the things that are quite irksome. And I did want to also say that I really like when he talks about the negativity of the brain, because I find in situations when we get into a situation where there's an issue, I can scan it, lock it, and load it in minutes. Actually, not even minutes. Like it's so I'm reminded that if I can let go of that sort of, what does he say? The emotional past, if I can let go of that as quickly as possible in a mindful state and quickly pull the circuit breaker and come back to reality, it's very, very, very helpful. Now that always doesn't happen, but I think that's the training of trying to come back as quickly as we can to the present moment and reality. And then the other thing I just would share is that what I'm learning in relationships is that if I can go to he talks about going as quickly as possible to repairing. It has helped so much, that idea of just, going quickly to repair and practicing that, because it diffuses the buildup of the storyline that we like to tell ourselves, I think, and we stay with that storyline, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so what I have found is that if I can go to repair as quickly as possible, it helps us come back to that gentleness as quickly as possible.
Yeah, the peace treaty really spends a lot of emphasis on helping you separate what's happening in the relationship at this moment from all of the stuff that's accumulated from past action. So it's very, very good that way, helping you to separate that out, and also emphasizing the importance of getting to the repair quickly. So I think Thich Nhat Hanh suggests 24 hours. And if you're still feeling, you still got steam coming out of your ears in 24 hours, that you write what he calls a peace note to just, give your intention to get to repair, but just saying that you need a little bit more time, because there's absolutely no point in getting to repair if you're still steaming, because you're just going to make things worse. You have to get to a place of calm openness where you're seeing things in a more realistic balance. But anyway, just it just fits very beautifully with this talk.
That was another really great talk. Thanks, Corey. I just feel like it's something, both parts of that, that I could listen to over and over, because you're going along and like, yeah, that's great. That's great. That's great too. And it's like, now I'm trying to remember what was so great, because it's just too much to retain. But yeah, I think I'll watch that a few times.
I think that sometimes lots with even the Dhamma talks that we've heard through the years, right? As just your head is just spinning by the end of it, because there's just so much. But I think the trick is to just keep unpacking all of those little tools and tricks to help us on our journey, on our path.
And I like to think some of it is absorbed subconsciously, at least.
And I think, Millie, when you come into that experience that situation, then those thoughts would come out, right?
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully like the awareness is there
Usually,
to recall.
yeah, recall that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Danica, it's like the idea of just celebrating when we do something right, and pat ourselves on the back a little when we've actually engaged those tools, because it takes a long time. It takes a long time to unearth those, that like Sanghamitta says, we're not only just unearthing what are things, we're unearthing the evolution of everything, and it takes a long time to cut off those roots.
Yeah, sometimes you have to, like, it would take a little longer for you to learn that too in life. With my daughter, I thought, like, autonomy, like she's more independent than I thought she would be. And she left home to university when she was 17. Now she's 21. And first few years, I struggled to get my autonomy on her, I guess, thinking that, she's a teenager and she would go the wrong way and all that. But she proved that she's capable of being herself and doing well, as a teenager. And yeah.
I think a lot of these things that he suggests, I have a 22-year-old, and I use all of these relational tools with him as well, like, you know, going quickly to repair and being able to apologize and getting his opinion of how he's feeling in a conflict. So.
I just wanted to maybe add like a practical, not that none of this is practical, it all is, but just it strikes me, there was a couple of things. So right at the top of your screen right now, stay longer with positive comments. And then, oh, sorry, Corey, can you scroll down again?
Yeah.
And then the build up the bank account of good assets. So maybe because I'm a good Buddhist, a good Buddhist imitator, I like to make lists. So one of the things, there's a couple of things that I do. So because the bad things do stick with us and we are more prone to paying attention to them. Something I started a long time ago, I don't even know when exactly, but I keep files in my email, a folder called Keepers. So anytime I get like a nice, and this was especially at work, I think, anytime I get like a nice compliment or something like that, I just pop it in there so that it's available. And I don't even know that I actually ever go back and read them, but it's nice to know that there's a folder there where people have commented that something I did was good or whatever. And then of course, if there is some kind of like self-emergency, there is the possibility to go back there. And then the other thing is that I've noticed the other thing I'm doing now with my text messages is if I'm having, like if I have someone who's close to me do a similar sort of thing, like maybe talk about something that they appreciate about me or something like that, I will, right now I'm just kind of, because you can't see anyone, I'm screenshotting them and then I'll like go back and read them, and it allows me to sort of like get it into my body, because when I'm talking with people, I'm really in the moment, but then I don't remember anything afterwards, like a bit like a goldfish. So I have found that these two things have really helped in terms of helping to make that balance, because even if the person you're talking with isn't aware of the ratio difference or whatever, you can kind of do that for yourself. And it kind of, I guess, gives them the benefit of the doubt as well. Like, so anyway, just some ideas for to share.
Thanks for that, Crystal. I'm reminded of, I'm not sure where I read it. It might even been in Rick Hanson's book or something, that, you know, it does take a long time to implant that positivity. And if we stay long, I think I've read that if you stay longer with the positivity, it actually has a way of going into the brain. We're sometimes really quick to, oh, thank you, and then we're back to the negative, right? And
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a kind of a cultural thing, to not be boastful and to kind of, shrug off the compliments. So it's a good reminder to watch ourselves if we're doing that, and to let ourselves receive it. But also I think to, like Crystal, you're talking about sort of building up the compliments in a bigger way, but we can also do that for other people, where we kind of make it into a more like reinforce those positive gestures with either repetition or just putting more effort into them.
I think that's a great point. And I think even commenting on them. So something that I've been working on lately, or more lately is boundaries. And so I know that women often have maybe more issues with this, just socialized that way or whatever. And so when my girlfriends will do like a good boundaries thing, I'll be like, oh, good boundaries, excellent job. You know, like I'll really point it out for them because they're not pointing it out. And I want them to know that that was like a really good thing. So I think that's a great point, Millie, to make sure that we do it for ourselves, but also for others as well.
Crystal, can you talk a little bit more about that? I've always sort of, you know, and I so appreciate the idea of boundaries. I really do. And but I wonder sometimes about, you know, the boundary or the line versus the open-heartedness and the vulnerability. And do we need both? You know, does one need to be more in different situations? So can you talk about, like, I feel like it's you know, oh, I've got boundaries around that. I've got boundaries around that. And I feel sometimes that's our defensive mechanism that's kicked in from biology to some degree, is that, oh yeah, I have like totally boundaries around that. And I sometimes feel that hasn't served me very well. So can you talk about that?
Sure. I don't proclaim to be an expert at all. I'm literally just learning it as I go, but I can appreciate what you're saying, Corey. So I'll just kind of say what I have in my mind. So I actually am not sure if I've ever said that, but I totally know what you mean about people who do that. And I think you're right. I think your intuition there about that being like more of a defensiveness or a block rather than a healthy boundary is probably accurate. I think there's not a real science to it. What I'm learning is that, and I think what I have done personally is that I have been open to everything. So I've actually gotten trespassed or taken advantage of because I don't want to be, you know, the person who doesn't have an open heart. So I'm going to just accept. And then I end up kind of going, oh, who even am I at this point anymore? So I think I'm more on the other end of the spectrum, but I think I had a therapist once that talked about your boundary being mesh and that it is wider or more tight, and that's a dynamic thing. So there's not like a definite thing like, oh, I don't talk about this because I have a boundary about that. But as we go through life, you know, if I'm with a safe person that I trust and that I know wants the best for me, then I can have a more open boundary. Whereas if I'm with someone I don't know or someone who's proven to be maybe less trustworthy, then I can have a more tight boundary. It doesn't mean that I don't love them. And Rick talks about this in both of the videos that we've watched, about that idea that we can both hold someone in our heart as well as know that this isn't, he talks about it, I think, in terms of social justice. But I think that that's the case all the time. And certainly I've had that experience where I kind of say that I love everyone. And I'm also not sure, like some people maybe I wouldn't like give my credit card to, like that kind of a thing. I think we can do both. And I think we're not taught we can do both, or we're not socialized we can do both. But I think my experience is that we are able to do both. I can look at you and know that you're a person who deserves goodness, that you have a past, that you probably have been hurt, and that breaks my heart, and I can sit with you there because we have similarities. And then also you need to be held responsible for the way you behave, or I won't, or you can behave all you want, but I'm not going to sit here and take it. I'm going to remove myself from the situation or something like that.
Yeah, I think there's a difference. You know, metta is boundless. So we can exude metta, this loving friendliness, unconditionally. But what we're allowing to come in, I think that's where the boundary is. So there's not a boundary on what goes out. There's a boundary on what you're allowing to
That's
come.
a great way to say it. Yeah.
So we're at 9:57. Was there anything else before we move to the closing?
No, I did want to share a book though that I think is fantastic, and it's by John Wellwood, and it's called Perfect Love, Imperfect Relationships. And he talks a lot about grievances, that we hold grievances, and it sort of is around that defensiveness, I think, and letting go of those grievances and learning to really find out what our grievances are. And so I've really enjoyed that book. So I just wanted to share that with you this morning. Just one more thing.
Yeah, he's a very good author. Okay, we ready for our ending?
Thank you, Sangamita.
Okay. So we're on the Brahma Vihara of equanimity. So first of all, if you can bring to mind a person that you feel neutral about, don't have love feelings or hate feelings, and direct these phrases to them. You are the owner of your karma. Your happiness and unhappiness depends upon your actions, not upon my wishes for you. I care for you as a suffering human being, but I cannot keep you from suffering. I wish you true happiness, but I cannot make your choices for you. Now bring to mind someone who's been very supportive of you and send the phrases to them. You are the owner of your karma. Your happiness and unhappiness depends upon your actions, not upon my wishes for you. I care for you as a suffering human being, but I cannot keep you from suffering. I wish you true happiness, but I cannot make your choices for you. Now bring to mind a friend, and if the previous person was a friend, just think of another friend and send the phrases to them. You are the owner of your karma. Your happiness and unhappiness depend upon your actions, not upon my wishes for you. I care for you as a suffering human being, but I cannot keep you from suffering. I wish you true happiness, but I cannot make your choices for you. And now bring to mind somebody that you have a difficult relationship with. You are the owner of your karma. Your happiness and unhappiness depend upon your actions, not upon my wishes for you. I care for you. I care for you too as a suffering human being, but I cannot keep you from suffering. I wish you true happiness, but I cannot make your choices for you. And now send the phrases to yourself. I am the owner of my karma. My happiness and unhappiness depend on my actions, not my wishes or hopes. I care for myself, and I am determined to follow the path of peace, the Noble Eightfold Path. I wish myself happiness, and I am determined to make skillful choices. All beings are owners of their karma. The happiness and unhappiness of all beings depends upon their actions, not upon my wishes for them. I care for all beings as suffering beings, but I cannot keep them from suffering. I wish all beings true happiness, but I cannot make their choices for them. My apologies, I muted you all. I shouldn't have done that. So we're going to give you the opportunity here to speak out people that you'd like to have remembered. So may the merit of our practice be shared with all sentient beings, named and unnamed. Please.
Mom.
Blair, Simone, Kima. May all beings be well and happy. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you, Corey.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Corey.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, you
Yeah,
too.
you too.
Okay. See you next Friday.